This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Lion Ranch. My name's Whitney Schwab. I'm the director of Five Valleys Land Trust, and it's an honor to be here at the Lion Ranch. The title of our event tonight, This Didn't Happen by Accident, Stories of Intentions on the Land, is evident all around us, beginning with this special place and the thoughtfulness of the Lion family in protecting this ranch for perpetuity. As you look around in every direction, you can see this thoughtful intention everywhere, from the North Hills to McCully Butte to Mount Jumbo, Mount Sentinel, Mount Dean Stone, and that's just naming a few. It's also a reminder that long before us, and for time immemorial, this place was cared for by the Salish and Kalispel people. We offer our respect for their history and culture, for their ancient and continuing presence in this landscape, and for the partnerships we continue to forge together in caring for this place for the generations to come. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our discussion panel. My first introduction is of Donna Erickson, author of Rooted at the Edge. Donna was raised riding horses, putting up hay, and herding cattle at Skyline Ranch. Donna was a professor of landscape architecture and planning at the University of Michigan and departed academia 25 years later to return home to Missoula. She began a consulting firm specializing in open space planning, organizational development, and land conservation with a primary goal of protecting intact rural landscapes and strong communities. Her work has supported countless land trusts, including Five Valleys, as well as the land conservation movement at large. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure now to introduce Bruce Bugbee, co-author of Saving the Big Sky. Bruce has been a professional conservationist since 1972, having a knack for seeing things no one else could see until he showed them. Throughout his career, Bruce worked to conserve over 900,000 acres in Montana. He completed more than 90 conservation easements, including some of the first deals cut in the Blackfoot River Valley in the 1970s. Closer to home, Bruce untangled a way to shore up public ownership in what became the Rattlesnake National Recreation and Wilderness areas, with trailheads just minutes from downtown. These are just a few examples of Bruce's technical genius that have helped make many of the places we love across Montana possible for all to enjoy. Welcome, Bruce. And it's a true pleasure now to introduce co-author of A Gracious Civic Enterprise, Greg Tollefson. Many of us have known Greg's prolific writing from his long-running outdoor column in the Missoulian. His love of the outdoors, people, and wildlife while conserving Western Montana landscapes was clear in every effort he made throughout his various roles at Five Valleys Land Trust. While it takes many hands to get this work done, there is often a lightning rod or tip of the spear bravely forging it all ahead. We can undoubtedly assign this title to Greg on behalf of many significant landscape protection efforts, but I feel compelled to point one out right now, and that's Mount Jumbo. Protecting Mount Jumbo in 1996 was a significant turning point, catalyzing our community's commitment to protecting values that we all continue to hold dear today. Welcome, Greg. Finally, please welcome tonight's discussion host, Justin Angle. Justin is a professor and the Poe Family Distinguished Faculty Fellow at the University of Montana's College of Business. He is also creator and host of A New Angle podcast, featuring interesting people and their stories from Montana. We are thrilled to be those interesting people sharing stories about Montana tonight. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Justin, and we hope you enjoy being with us this evening.
Thanks, Whitney. Look at these interesting people right in front of you. Interesting people. Imagine that. Let's start tonight with a pretty simple question, and that is, when did you start caring about the land and why? Greg, let's start with you.
I was born right here in Missoula, Montana, in the Thornton Hospital, right on the ground at what used to be our new library now stands, but now it's our old new library. I was born into a preacher's family, a mother who was a homesteader's daughter from eastern Montana. How lucky I was and my 4 brothers and sister were to be able to grow up in Montana. And every time I've come and gone from this state over the last almost 8 decades, I've breathed a sigh of relief every time I cross the border into Montana. I went away to college and the service for 6 years, and I came back to the place I loved, and something was different. And I went to the University of Montana to pick up some teaching credential credits, and I took a Montana history class. That class in 1971, the year this book came out, which Montana, 20th century Montana, A State of Extremes, K. Ross Toole. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It should be required reading for anybody with a Montana driver's license. And that book convinced me that we were in peril in this state, the things that I loved about it and the things that were so important. And I've never looked back.
Donna, how about you? When did you start caring and why?
I was raised as a ranch kid in the North Hills, and I have to say that you folks have the best view of the North Hills to your left of anywhere in the valley. Stunning from up here. My connection to the land comes directly from my attachment to that landscape. We kind of ranched on marginal ranch land, really, but my family totally identified as ranchers, even though it wasn't the good hay ground of Grass Valley or whatever. It was good for growing cows. We raised Hereford cattle. We had Hampshire sheep, and we raised registered Appaloosa horses. So I have so many lessons from that landscape that you see to your left, that I feel, and I write about it in my book a bit, that I feel that landscape partly raised me. A lot of lessons. Keep your elevation on horseback once you've gained it. Watch out for those prickly, long, spiny hawthorn spikes as you're riding through the draw. And always cherish and honor those big pea pines up on that ridge that you see from here. So the land has always been really a core part of me, and I left Missoula for 25 years and came back, and during that 25 years, that land was still a core part of who I am. And I depict some of that in the book as well. It directly influenced the career that I chose, and I chose a career kind of later in life, and I followed a path in landscape architecture and planning. Landscape architecture, many people think of it as garden design, and that's not the part that I was so interested in. What I liked about the combination about landscape architecture is the combination of design, aesthetics, and natural features or nature. And the combination of those two things was really appealing to me. And I always, in my schooling and in my career, always tried to apply that combination to large rural landscapes. Not so much the garden design part. So all of that really circles back, that career and my entire adult life really circles back to an upbringing in the North Hills that we see from here.
Bruce, how about you?
What I'm always drawn to is a sense of place. How is it that we are aware of this place? How do we feel about it? How does that touch us inside? And when it touches us inside, what does it ask of us to do? And a great example came to mind. And I must say I've had the good fortune to be exposed in a number of ways to the enjoyment of this place. But one of the most poignant came from Smoke Elser. And you may well have heard his story of how he takes these corporate executives into the Bob Marshall, and he requires that they leave their cell phones, all that stuff behind. But then he tells them to find out about the Ponderosa pine and whether it smells like vanilla or root beer. And if you've ever tried to do that, you find yourself embracing the trunk, particularly the older ones with the puzzle bark and the deep grooves. And you get just a little whiff of what's there. And it really sounds rather intimate, but that experience just begins to open up an enjoyment of the place. And I've told this story to my grandchildren and to my children, and it never fails to invite their enjoyment of this place. And with that enjoyment, the responsibility of its care.
Well said. Thank you, Bruce. Whitney, when did you start caring?
Oh, I think it could have been hugging a ponderosa, but as a child, I had the opportunity to grow up with a back 40, and a back 40 that backed up to vaster agricultural lands in Boulder County, Colorado, that were protected by Boulder County open space and had public access easements, for everyone to enjoy these landscapes. And so I had the chance to be scared by bull snakes and catch crawdads and swim in the irrigation ditch and, gain confidence and skills as a young person in nature and outdoors. And, the land will teach you. You get the benefit from it, and you also get the consequences. And I think those early experiences really just made it a place of respite as I grew and spent time in more populated areas and cities and in people-y places. And so I've just always sought that, place of respite connecting to the land.
Wonderful. So there's this screen over here. One of the slides is a map drawn in 1995 of the Missoula Valley and these things that were called the conservation cornerstones. Bruce was involved in the conception of that map. Talk about the vision back in 1995. What were the cornerstones and how did they come to be, and how was that vision conceived?
Well, I don't think it was mine alone, which was critical. The Five Valleys Land Trust was the major conductor of that process that brought it into its permanence as part of our landscape here. I think that the idea for it and in our look around the state and the ways that conservation has been carried out, it's a story of a particular focal point that has drawn people collectively for caring. And Jumbo is one of those. And what you notice with Jumbo is that every day you see something different. And every time of day, it looks different. And of course, there's that marvelous story of the shorelines of Lake Missoula. And I've always enjoyed the idea of being in Lake Missoula. But the Rattlesnake National Recreation Area and Wilderness set the stage, and Mount Jumbo followed. And in that, the willingness to support a bond issue, the ability to connect to what surrounds us here in a visceral way is available to us daily and any time of day, and from all points of view. And that is special. And that is something that we hope that our children and grandchildren and their children will enjoy.
Donna, private lands and working lands are a big part of this equation as well. You and your family live a lot of those tensions. Talk about your perspective of the role on private and working lands and keeping this valley what it is?
Yeah, families on working lands are often feeling a lot of pressure to conserve their land long term. And meanwhile, they are usually often doing a very good job of stewarding their land in the short term or even over many, many generations. But it's really often very complicated for them to think about the future of their land. And it has so much to do with a lot of financial issues and a lot of family issues. And, I know all of that about all of that firsthand. The other factor I think that I've written about a bit is just the issue of kind of conflicting values between ranchers and their neighbors next door in town. There's often sort of some differences there that make conservation hard, but are not insurmountable. For instance, the North Hills is valued by the community, I think, a lot more and more for scenery, for recreation, for habitat. The ranchers who've lived up there for generations, not so concerned about the scenery and the recreation part. And so there's kind of a bit of a difference there, although there's overlap too. North Hills ranchers, and I think this is probably true in the ranchers at the edge of a lot of places in the Missoula Valley, really care a lot about what comes off the land, the productivity of it, the beef, the lamb, the produce, the coal in the North Hills. And we're coming back to valuing a lot of that more and more. Well, not the coal so much, but the food. So there's just really a tremendous kind of opportunity, I think, to bridge that over time, to have a lot more value placed on the productivity of the land, especially with the whole local food movement and all of that. So I wanted just to point out the tremendous amount of food that's grown historically at the edge of this city. In the North Hills, I suspect in the South Hills, definitely Grass Valley, and all the way around, the tremendous amounts of food, even on pretty dry hillsides. And my research showed a lot of everything from, beef and eggs and all the dairy products and everything grown in the North Hills and sold in Missoula. And it seems like the local food movement and the whole land conservation movement through the cornerstones that the city and county have developed can really work together to try to connect. I think that word connection is so important, to connect the people in town with the ranchers and the people who live at the edges and in the more rural landscapes, and also connect the land itself. The connectivity of the actual landscape is important. For instance, the caretakers at the homestead are coming back around to learning what really grows well in the North Hills and coming back to the kinds of things that my grandparents grew, the rhubarb, the asparagus, the raspberries, the various kinds of crops that are important. And connecting that to the city of Missoula, I think, is really important. So I think all of that is kind of one angle on, no pun intended, on the cornerstone goals, but I think it's one important one.
A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com. Hey folks, coming up on October 4th, we're excited to bring you another live event, this time in collaboration with Climate Smart Missoula. Not the Dark Ages, Climate Science Continues Despite the Attacks, is a conversation with Amy Martin, creator of the Peabody Award-winning Threshold podcast, and Christopher Preston, award-winning author of several great books, including his most recent, Tenacious Beasts. Join us at 5 p.m. on October 4th at the Confluence Center in Missoula. For more information, visit missoulaclimate.org.
Hey, this is Jeff Petticord, and you're listening to A New Angle.
Greg, one of those cornerstones was and is Mount Jumbo, and you played a central role in getting that project done. Tell us the story.
The Jumbo project, as it came to be known as, was actually, it really was the first time that vision of a gracious civic enterprise was completely realized. But it began back in the early 1970s when I came back from college and the service and came to Missoula. There was stuff going on that I didn't know about. I didn't pay much attention. The only thing I did pay attention to was the dispute over the Smitty's Pancake Parlor across Rattlesnake Creek, which I actually went to the trial. But I didn't know about these organizations that were percolating in the community, and it was not until 20 years later that I became more involved in land conservation activities. There's lots of conservation stuff. But in Missoula, it was building from 1972. And it was building and building and building. And there was the local government was active. The conservation committee set this ball rolling to create a planning process that addressed open space. And the coalition was just building and building. And so when the time came for Mount Jumbo to happen, there was nothing that was going to stop it. I took the job as executive director of Five Valleys Land Trust when it was the office was a phone booth. Someone suggested I had been working on a thing called the Rock Creek Council and the Rock Creek Trust, and had learned about conservation easements, and the opportunity came up to apply for the job as director of Five Valleys, and fortunately I was selected, and immediately took half my salary to hire Miney Smith to help me. So we were splitting a $9,000 salary in two. Anyway, I can't hardly believe that. But there was stuff moving at the time. There had been a group of agencies and conservation groups and agencies talking about protecting the elk herds around Missoula. Living on the Edge. The poster you've seen was created by that group. But one of their ultimate goals, and it probably was the most important, was save Mount Jumbo because of critical habitat for that elk herd. That was always the moving piece. But when the time came, the right people showed up at the right time. The groundwork had been laid in this community, but it was a community that came together. And the feeling you had was one of, hey, we are going to get, this is going to happen. It's just going to happen. And it rolled. And it didn't matter what your political stripe was. You know, it didn't matter what your economic status was. Mount Jumbo was the springboard for future conservation projects, future open space bond issues. It was a springboard for the same kind of open space programs and open space bond issues in towns throughout the Rocky Mountain West. We provided advice and consultation to Bozeman, Boise, I think maybe Salt Lake City. Nobody had done this before. In Missoula, it happened again and again and again. I think we've passed 3 open space bond issues. So this organization became kind of the model for regional land trusts, for community and regional land trusts, one of the models for them throughout the country.
Whitney, bring it up to today. I mean, we're sitting in the flanks of a recent success story, the Dean Stone Project. So much hard work, so much success. Talk about the vision for going forward and some of the challenges facing the community and the organization at this moment.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's hard. I have to take it from where it's left to get to this moment, which is acknowledging that those community cornerstones continue to drive our work today, and that was something that really put a framework in place with us, with the county, with the city, with our culture to take a look at like where are the places and the treasures that can really provide community benefit. And it's, all of this momentum from everything what Bruce has mentioned to what Donna's talked about and what Greg's left off with Mount Jumbo brings forward. We're building on those shoulders of the giants, that work continues. And when we began the Mount Dean Stone project about 10 years ago, we were ready because when the Barmeyer family said, we'd like to protect a lovely piece of our property, our family has benefited from being in this community, and we'd like the kids of Missoula, the future, to have the same opportunity. You need private land protection and the public access because it goes hand in hand, and it does help keep landscape level intact and in good culture and good partnerships at the table. And I think that's one thing that Greg alluded to with all the many hands that came to the table on Jumbo is that recognition of partnership. And as a community, we get nothing done without partnership. And so Dean Stone gained significant momentum thanks to the leadership of the Barmeyer family and our ability to bring partners together to go, well, where do we go from here? Because an overlook would be cool, but wouldn't it be neat to get to the top of the mountain? And that was ambitious. That was a leap of faith to go, how do we get there? And if we get there, would the Nature Conservancy consider transferring the 2,500 acres on the south side to us or to a public agency also for public benefit and public access? Because these are lands that have historically had an open door policy because they were champion timberlands. And we'd like to see that become solidified legal access so the community could continue to use it the way that they have and they wanted. Fast forward to now, and you look in Upper Miller Creek, because all during that time, speaking to ranching on the edge of town, we've got the Oxbow Cattle Company, who is in Upper Miller Creek, which is the south side of Mount Dean Stone, all within a couple of mile swath there. And these guys are running a very successful cattle operation adjacent to cul-de-sacs and subdivision. And there's got to be an edge somewhere, and that's the edge. Our current work with the Mount Dean Stone Committee, which is a community partnership around, what would the community like to see, particularly in what has been coined a backyard backcountry, this really wild feeling place on the edge of town, which is the south side of Mount Dean Stone and the Miller Creek side. That committee has been hard at work acknowledging that, growth and development and change is going to continue to come up Miller Creek. And so there needs to be places for the neighbors to have their dog walk loop in their area and their nice big view sheds and their farm to table store at Bart and Wendy's Oxbow Ranch. And then we also still want to be able to protect those values that have been used more in more recent historical times of being able to have access to hunting and keeping some of that backyard backcountry feel there. But the final thing I want to say about that whole area, and that I'm so proud of our community for respecting and embracing and being good partners on, is the fact that when we took ownership of the Ridge Line and in partnership with the city opened the House of Sky Trail along the ridge, we started with a wildlife closure, a winter wildlife closure. And folks have respected that. They've done a really good job of allowing that protection for wintering elk habitat to remain undisturbed. And I think that would be a really hard thing to have folks understand and embrace had we not had this early work of Mount Jumbo and certainly others, but the leadership of Mount Jumbo. So the entrenchment of the cultural values of where we are now, based on all of this work, is phenomenal.
So in the spirit of the history, the vision, the topics we've discussed, we'd like to leave you tonight with a bit of a call to action. We'll start with you, Donna. The question is, what are the cultural characteristics of a successful conservation-oriented community? We've talked about the DNA. What do we have to do? What does this group have to do? What do the rest of the citizens here have to do to keep it alive and thriving?
I think my colleagues here have made a good argument for you need a place like Missoula. that Missoula is a stellar example of it takes such strong community support, really, to for rural lands at the edges of town to be conserved. And so what it takes is a community that, with the knowledge that unlimited development will remove the vibrancy of the community itself. And I think a lot of Missoulians know that. It takes a community that is willing to conserve habitat and other resources, but not necessarily public access to those places. The success of the city and county bonds that Greg talked about are evidence of that, of Missoulians being able to have it's just a wonderful example of their priority of Missoulians to be willing to conserve places that they can't walk on. It takes a community that understands the challenges of working lands management, that really tries to understand where landowners are coming from. Kind of goes back to one of my previous answers, is that connection between ranchers and landowners and the city folk who care about those landscapes and want to see them conserved. It takes a community that places a high value on education and cultural resources. And I think the Moon Randolph homestead is a fantastic example of that, with the easement that's been on it since, I guess, 1995, one of the early ones. And finally, it takes a community that wants to eat. And I go back to my other answer on that one, and a community that cares about local food and valuing good agricultural land.
Greg, your perspective.
Missoula is unique in some ways, but I think Montana is unique in many important ways, particularly by, the good pay for the great big beautiful bill, when our two senators from Montana made sure that public lands in Montana would not be affected by that because of the outpouring of concern from people all across the state, regardless of your political stuff. People in this state love, it's not just public lands, they love this state. They love this landscape. They drive across it and they have landscape music playing in their heads when they're driving from Great Falls to Scobie. And it's that fierce love of a place, the sense that we got something that nobody else has, that drives all of this stuff. And it's something that, Steinbeck driving through Montana and other places are beautiful, but Montana is a love affair for him. Well, if some of you who know me well get tired of me saying this, but this is all about love of place and each other, and they go together. And we have that in this community, but it's always in peril. It's always in peril. The job will never be done. And you got to find ways to stay informed when we don't have good ways to stay informed anymore.
Bruce, what cultural characteristics do you think we need most?
I would add a few other ingredients. The Lee Metcalf Refuge and the Bitterroot. The Clark Fork River Trail system is an equal component of all of that. The Alberton Gorge, another one. The the examples that the Salish people have set for us, the buffalo, the wild and scenic river status, the first tribal wilderness in the country. There are so many ways that we are being given examples of how to act upon how we feel and what we know is important. And what's thoroughly enjoyable is that it's not the same for everybody. We all contribute in our own way. And that makes the community of Missoula particularly special.
Whitney will give you the last word on that topic. What cultural vibes do you want to keep alive?
Well, I think the greatest one is really demonstrated here with this labor of love that each of these authors have put into creating books for all of us to enjoy and learn from about the history of our place and the history of our culture. I mean, truly, we've been loving on Missoula in this moment, but as that was coming through, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, but have you read Bruce's book yet? Because this is Montana. I mean, and there's timeless themes across all of our communities, whether you're from here or you're from Scobie. And I think that now more than ever, we need to be united and connected to those values that we share in this love of the land. And again, the recognition that that this wasn't accidental. This is a culture and a commitment and a love. So a love of family, a love of place, a love of wildlife, a love of livelihood. And as far as moving forward from here, I think the more that we can share that word and invite people to learn about it and get involved, that's the answer.
We do have some time for questions. If anybody has a question.
Do comments phrased as questions work?
You know, it's a live event, so I can't really have any control.
Thank you. Well, certainly thanks to Five Valleys for hosting this. Thank you all. I wanted to, I think it's really important for us to also recognize the legacy we have in the Montana Constitution for protecting a clean and healthful environment. And I also want to not correct my good friend Greg Tollefson, but at least add a little nuance to that. Some of the first conservation work done in Missoula, I think, was an easement that Bruce Bugbee brought to the city of Missoula on Mount Sentinel. And one of, I think, the most significant pieces of what was done was the preservation of the riverfront, because this was in the very early days before any big mountain. The notion was to involve everybody, and we had to recognize that open space meant a lot of things to a lot of different people. It meant a practice field for Hellgate High School. It meant a nature garden for Graham Thompson. It meant public access. And so to get all of the people to come together to support that very first Missoula open space joint effort at conservation, it took recognizing that open space means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and access was one of them. And I think those two things really, Mount Jumbo was so significant, but I think our community had the history of joining together even before Mount Jumbo.
Anybody else?
I just always thought from the time that we moved here in 1971 that Missoula has a really strong can-do spirit. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really good.
Thank you, Ellen.
I have a challenging question. So I
deeply, deeply appreciate the work that so many people have done over decades to protect the, lands from further development. And as you've mentioned, that so many factors go into it, so many people have to be involved. There are lots of competing interests. A lot of people are very interested in protecting lands for recreation. And a lot of our remaining unprotected open spaces are getting so inundated from, they're getting loved to death. And I'm wondering if you see any point in the future where there will be lands protected just for themselves without having to be open to recreation and to, human trammeling.
There's already that possibility through conservation easements. There's conservation easements it's always up to the landowner whether there's going to be public access or depending on the funding sources. So there's lots of conservation done just for the values that don't include recreational values, I have to say. So I'd have to, public acquisitions for that purpose, that's another question, and I can't address that. But certainly in the broader scale of things, much of the work that Bruce and the larger land trust movement in the country has done, or in the state has done, is largely for the purpose of the land itself and maintaining habitat and so forth. So that's how I have to answer that.
And that is the Purple Cliffs of the Missouri. I don't know if you've had the good fortune to see that. It's near Townsend, just above the Canyon Ferry Reservoir. It actually is a purple wall that comes to the Missouri, and it is visible from the other side of the river. But that's how you enjoy it. You don't go on it. And that was a result of a project taken on the bicentennial for re-examining the route of Lewis and Clark and key places that remained available for conservation. Traveler's Rest, by the way, is another one that came out of that. It goes on and on. There's a lot of good things in Great Falls that came out of that effort too, including the sulfur springs that Sacagawea was cured. But I think that the availability of these places to us in any form, whether it's a spiritual connection or active use, needs to be understood in the context of time. These perceptions, the related land uses, will change over time. Our own possessions of what it means to own something evolve over time. So I have confidence not in that discovery of places that need the conservation effort for their own sake is along with a variety of other places. And the challenge is to recognize just what exactly those places are about and who resonates with that lead to action for conservation.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Keely Larson is our producer. Libby Riddle is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music, and Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.